The following essay is a combination of two previously published essays. The first, entitled Texas Sky, published in Oyster River Pages on November 12, 2019. The second, entitled I Am Fatima Matar, a refugee from Kuwait, and This Is How I Parent, published in Lifehacker on March 12, 2021. Links to both essays are in the description. I mention my paintings in this essay, so I've also included a link to my art website in the description, in case the listener wants to see my artwork. You are only free when you realize you belong no place. You belong every place, no place at all. The price is high. The reward is great. Maya Angelou. To come this far. Did I tell you how beautiful the sky is in Texas? On some mornings, it's an endless field of powder blue with strokes of soft pearl. Some days, the sky resembles Monet's water lily ponds, lavender melting into dusty pink, clouds like tufts of cotton. Sunsets are the most magical, violent blood-red streaks tearing open the belly of a blue evening, dizzying in its brutality and majesty. Even when it rains and the sky throws tantrums and tormented clouds blow across, even then there is beauty and power. The next morning, all is forgiven. The furious sky is a tranquil azure once more, with vigorous white splashes like the crests of leaping dolphins. I stand at the chain-link fence. My fingers curl around the cold, diamond-shaped wire. On the other side of this detention center is America, the land of freedom, hope, and opportunity. I look up. It's early January 2019. Canada geese are making their annual migration flight across the country, traveling south to warmer climates, their comical cries echoing one another. Every flock creates the letter V. Multiple V's rush across the sky above me. A tremendous sense of freedom, knowing no boundaries, accepting no border, no country, no fence, no law. I am overcome with emotion. This is what it's like to be free. My daughter Juri and I shouldn't be in this detention center. We arrived at Chicago O'Hare Airport late December 2018, carrying valid passports and visas. The date on our return tickets exceeded the permissible 6-month stay, which raised suspicion. Our luggage was searched, and the documents I had brought with me proving my prosecution in my homeland Kuwait were found. Translated papers detailing legal action I was facing for my political and religious views and my social activism. If you don't tell me why you're really here, I will put you on the next plane to Kuwait, the angry officer bellowed, inside the interrogation room of the Department of Homeland Security. Under the jeering gaze of 5 other armed cops, I explained that I had come to America seeking asylum. My life in Kuwait felt like a tiny room with a very low ceiling. I couldn't go far. I had to keep my head down, and I had to stoop all the time. When you are threatened from a very young age with, "You better not think that," "You better not say that," it terrorizes you. It keeps you small and unsettled. As a girl, I didn't have feminist terminology. I never heard words like feminism, patriarchy, misogyny, or sexism. My feminism was organic. It didn't come from a book I read or a movie I saw. It was a fire that burned within me each time I was subjected to servitude simply because I was a girl. To serve food for men, to clear men's dirty dishes, to answer men's angry shouts. I resented this and asked why. Why do I have to help prepare and serve food at family gatherings while my uncles and male cousins sat and drank endless cups of tea, pretending to solve the world's problems as I waited on them? Why did I have to run back and forth to the kitchen, bringing more plates and cutlery? Why did we women hide in another room while the men ate, waiting for our turn to eat after they had finished? When all the dishes had been disturbed, eaten from, messy, dirty, with spilled greasy stew and scattered salad. This isn't right, I would protest. Shouldn't the men help too? It's their home too. It's their meal too. Why can't we all eat together? Why was my brother sent to an expensive private school, while us 5 girls went to free public schools? And why didn't I, as a woman, have autonomy over the simplest decision, what to wear, or the most important decision, who to marry? At home, I had to fear my father. My mother scolded me into submission and obedience with the warning, "Your father better not hear you say that or he'll kill you." The violent, controlling, unkind father was later replaced by an equally unkind, violent, and controlling husband. The 3rd time my husband hit me was also the 3rd time he promised to never hit me again. There was mental, emotional, and financial abuse too. Growing up, I saw my father abuse my mother, and I wasn't going to put my daughter through that trauma. So I got a divorce, despite my parents' disapproval, and my mother's declaration that all men are violent. It's a wife's duty to be patient. Inside my home, I feared my father and later my husband. Home was never safe. Outside my home, I feared the sheikh, who jailed anyone who criticized him. This is how patriarchy works. This is how patriarchy keeps women small, afraid, unsafe, and silent. Different versions of the oppressor, inside the home and outside it. Despite the tight control over my life, I did well in college and got a scholarship to get my master's and doctorate in law in the United Kingdom, a privilege few women have where I come from. As a lawyer, as a law professor, and a feminist, I strongly believe in democracy, freedom of speech, and gender equality. But I couldn't live by my beliefs in Kuwait. I felt it was my duty to speak up against the dehumanization of the stateless people. More than 50,000 people who are long-time inhabitants but are deprived of citizenship, health, education, and work. I blamed the sheikh for their tragedy. I called him corrupt and was prosecuted for it. The charges against me were defamation and undermining state security, both felonies. I asked God for equal gender rights in a Twitter post and was charged with blasphemy. I spoke up about the growing problem of honor killings, femicide in Kuwait, and was prosecuted. I argued for the sacredness of freedom of speech, denouncing the 5,000 Kuwaitis on trial for their political views. I facilitated talks, blogged, spoke on television and radio. I started a small feminist group at the college where I taught, renouncing many Islamic ideologies that enabled the control of women and encouraged misogyny. I called for the rights of the LGBTQ in a country where homosexuality is still illegal, and I organized and led protests against the Kuwaiti government's ban of more than 5,000 books. In a cold, austere courtroom, I sat next to my lawyer, awaiting my verdict. The seriousness of the mahogany furnishings and the judge's elevated bench added to the drama. A large plaque in the shape of a scale hung on the center wall with a verse from the Quran, "And when you judge between people, judge with justice," written underneath. The silence seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Only the gentle sound of prayer beads bumping against each other created an eerie rhythm, the way a ticking clock threatens that time is running out. My heart pushed against my chest. My eyelids felt heavy, as if I was sleepy, and yet I was never more alert. My mind, unable to process the crises, sent my body into shut-down sleeping mode. The slightest whispers from the spectators sitting behind me stirred and agitated me. There were several people from the press and a few social media trolls who wanted to be the first to tweet about this. The first Kuwaiti woman to be tried and imprisoned for posting a politically controversial tweet. The fact that I was a law academic added to the irony and made it more newsworthy. All I kept thinking was, what will happen to my daughter when I am jailed? Who will care for her? When my imprisonment became imminent, I fled, knowing that my daughter and I would never be safe in Kuwait. When I think of how unfree I was for most of my life, the reality of my lack of freedom chokes me. I fled the control of my family and the control of my husband, but there was a larger prison, society. In Dilley Detention Center in San Antonio, Texas, I lie awake on the bottom bunk bed. Jewelry occupies the top. We share this room with 5 other families, mothers and their children. We are the only English-speaking family here. I listen to the rapid Spanish chatter between our roommates. I don't understand a word, and yet the emotion of the language moves me. The rise and fall of the quick string of words. Laughter that soon turns into something resembling a serious reprimand, then a burst of hysterical laughter once more. Up and down, the emotions go within seconds. Always a sense of urgency and drama. The breathlessness of the language is engaging. They've turned the television to a radio channel playing Spanish songs. Loud, fast, catchy, upbeat, multi-instrumental songs that urge one to dance. It is past 10 o'clock at night, and I wonder if Juri can sleep through this noise. I contemplate whether to shout over the noise and ask her if she's okay, or climb up to her bed to check on her. I do neither. I feel lethargic and out of touch, unable to comprehend my reality. What will happen to us? Returning to Kuwait is not an option. We've left that life behind. That door has closed. I remember the tremendous fear I felt when we were detained for 4 long days in the airport, in a 2 by 2 meter room, with nothing but 2 dirty mattresses covering the whole floor. They were our beds. 3 security cameras on the ceiling, monitoring us from different angles, and glaring, eye-watering fluorescent lights we weren't allowed to turn off. They gave me grueling headaches, making me grind my teeth in pain. When I asked if I could access some aspirin from my confiscated bag, I was refused. 4 days without a shower, with access only to a dirty public toilet, we lay there in terror, not knowing what will happen to us. I couldn't voice my greatest fear to Juri. Will they separate us at the detention center? They took our cell phones and our luggage. Whenever I asked how long we would be kept there, I was told that due to government shutdown and the upcoming New Year holiday, it would take days. But don't think you'll be moved to a better place when you leave here. You'll only be put in another cell, the guards sneered. With lights constantly on and no watch on my wrist, time stretched endlessly like an uninterrupted scream. I had no way of telling how much time had passed, lost in an unfamiliar limbo between night and day, between today, yesterday, and tomorrow. I laid a shawl I was wearing under Juri's head before she fell asleep, so her face would not touch the dirty gym mattress, and felt a mammoth sense of guilt. What had I done? Why did I think it was safe for me to come to America and put my child through this? Full of shame and regret, I sat there and watched my daughter sleep, afraid to sleep myself, worried something would happen to her, afraid to ask if I could use the restroom for the same reason. I smothered my tears, not wanting Juri to wake up and see me crying. I needed to stay strong. From another room nearby, a woman with a Latin American accent was screaming with anguish. "Let go of me! Don't touch me! I didn't do anything wrong!" Followed by the sounds of male and female guards asking her to calm down. Another woman with an Arabic accent and small children was crying and explaining to an officer in broken English why it was impossible for her to return to Saudi Arabia. The details of when they flew us from Chicago to San Antonio, Texas is a blur. There was a lot of shouting. "Get up! They're taking you to a detention center. Quick, you'll miss the plane. Open your bags and dump as much stuff as possible. The bags are heavy. We don't want to pay for the extra weight. Besides, ICE won't let you keep any of the stuff." The guards yelled at us, and we silently obeyed, throwing away our personal belongings. On the bottom bunk bed at the detention center, I recall a moment when Juri and I were in O'Hare. A guard moved us to a smaller room because they wanted to put a larger family in the room we were in. The smaller room was dirtier, more oppressive, and didn't have mattresses. I said to the guard that this treatment was inhumane. He shouted at me to be quiet and to do as I was told. "You have no rights here," he yelled at me with scorn. To which I replied, "Yes, I do. I have the right to be treated with dignity." We weren't separated at the detention center. We slept in clean, tidy bedrooms, had 24-hour access to showers, and meals were plentiful and served 3 times a day. There was a clinic, a library, a school, and an open, spacious lawn area where kids can play and where I jogged every morning. Pro bono immigration lawyers were available to help us prepare for our credible fear interview, which had become the main worry for Juri and me during our time there. Agents of ICE is short for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, conducted these interviews with detainees to determine who had enough reason to fear going back to their homeland and therefore is eligible to stay, and who didn't and was deported. The criteria of what constitutes credible fear is purposefully left vague and broad and up to ICE's discretion. Juri and I were comparatively lucky. We passed the credible fear interview and left the center after 2 weeks. Some families have been there for many months. I visited America as a tourist in 2014 when I took Juri to Disney World when she was 9 years old, but we'd never lived in America. I asked my friend Muhammad for advice. Mo, as his friends call him, is one of the Kuwaiti stateless who left the brutal treatment in Kuwait for a better life in the US. He's been studying and working in Cleveland for years. He said that the winters are cold, but spring, summer, and fall are beautiful, and the people were wonderful. Mo helped me find a good school for Juri and an apartment close to her school. We arrived in Cleveland in mid-January of 2019. Our immigration lawyer told us it would take a year for us to receive social security numbers and work permits, which meant I had to make my savings last us a year. Despite our release from detention, we are still required to appear before an immigration court and convince a judge we had enough reason to seek asylum in the US. The date for our trial is still yet to be determined. When I finally got my work permit in early March 2020, the pandemic hit. I searched for a college teaching job, but to no avail. I told myself I could do any kind of work. I worked temporarily at Target, and now I'm a caregiver. I built an on-demand beauty service app called Beau. My two great loves, painting and writing, have generated me some income, albeit small and sporadic. I like to think that the difficulties I faced as a single mother have given me character and strength. In Kuwait, it is still shameful to be a divorced woman. Everywhere I went in search for an apartment for Juri and myself, I was rejected on the grounds that I was a single mother. Landlords looked at me and spoke to me with disdain and disgust. They refused to look me in the eyes when they told me that they only welcome tenants who are families. Seething, I stared them in the eyes and said, "My daughter and I are a family. Just because I don't have a husband doesn't mean we are less of a family." It infuriated me that everything I needed to do for my child required her father's presence and permission. I couldn't enroll her in a school without his signature. I couldn't renew her passport or issue her a civil ID. It terrified me that the hospitals in Kuwait declined a mother's consent if her child needed emergency surgery. Only the father's consent was taken into account. In the United States, I am not discriminated against on the basis of being a single mother, although it's true that in many narratives, single motherhood is still seen as an unfortunate state. But Juri and I have a special bond. We lift each other up. We make each other strong. We talk about everything, even the awkward stuff. We have inside jokes, and we understand each other's body language. It's always been me and her against the world. We've been on adventures. We didn't just dream of a better life. We took risks to have a better life. I've always asked Juri's opinion in everything I did, and always took her opinion seriously. This has given her confidence and wisdom, and the belief that she matters, and what she thinks matters. I divorced my abusive husband when Juri was 3 years old, but had she been old enough at the time, I know she would have encouraged me to leave. Juri loves her school in North Olmsted, Ohio, where she's made good friends. But the isolation of the pandemic has been hard on both of us. She, and all the other kids, had to continuously adapt to extreme, rapid changes. First, the schools were closed and everything was taught online. Then the schools reopened and the kids had to go back full-time. Then the number of COVID cases rose. The schools closed again, and the students went back to online learning. Then they did a hybrid system, attending in-person classes 2 days a week and distance learning 3 days a week. Now they are attending in-person classes full-time again. The pandemic has drained us emotionally, and the cold winter has made it hard even to go hiking. I often repeat to myself the Voltaire quote, "The happiest of lives is a busy solitude." But I would also like to sit in a cafe with a friend or go to the Cleveland Museum of Art. Looking ahead, there are still uncertainties. The pandemic, our immigration trial, but Juri and I remain hopeful. We've immersed ourselves in our new community. We've walked shelter dogs. We've helped sort out clothes for the homeless at churches. And we've marched in Black Lives Matter protests after George Floyd's murder. This is our home now. Every time I am overwhelmed by the uncertainty, I remember what Juri said to me when I was terrified and tearful as the airport police took us from that tiny room they detained us in to send us to a detention center in Texas. I considered asking them to send us back to Kuwait out of fear of being separated from her. But Juri said, "We didn't come this far, only to come this far." I know I'll get a teaching job at a good local college. I know my app will grow. I know I'll be able to publish my memoir, which I've been pitching for the last year and getting lots of rejections. I know I'll sell more paintings, and Juri will have everything I didn't have growing up. Full autonomy over her body, her mind, and critical life decisions. She'll have the ability to be outspoken without the threat of violence and imprisonment. She will dress however she pleases. She'll be able to love and marry whomever she chooses. She'll be able to travel, to study, to dream, and to grow.